So you recently picked up bouldering or climbing during the pandemic and you found that this new sport has become an addiction that you can't stop thinking of day and night. Now you are constantly learning and exploring new techniques, getting stronger, and you look forward to the next climb every day, thinking of that feeling you get when you send a grade you've never done before. The rush of dopamine as you match on the last hold and your friends cheer you on. The pump in your arms as you lock off right before a huge dyno. And now you look beyond the horizon, imagining what it would be like when you achieve the next milestone. Recently, I sent a grade I had never done before, and it felt like I had finally had some progress and broke through a plateau at Benin. Not to say that I've been training relentlessly or working with a coach, but the channel is called Casual Climbs after all, so I mainly do this recreationally. Nevertheless, it feels great to make some progress, and I thought of documenting my thoughts as a sort of journal to mark a milestone in my climbing journey, and what it took for me to get here. In this video, I'll be talking about what it took for me to climb my first V5, or what I initially thought was a V5/V6 at least. As a short disclaimer, I do want to mention that I'm not a professional climber by any means, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt and let me know in the comments what worked for you and what it took for you to climb your first V5. Now before we get into it, I do want to talk a bit about grading in general and how everyone's idea of a V5 is going to be slightly different. If you want to skip ahead, there are markers down below for the different sections of this video. Now grading is dependent on various factors, the first being subjective grading across different gyms. I personally got my estimation of grades based on one of the first few gyms that I started climbing at regularly, a gym called Kinetics. It was a sort of baseline that helped me get a rough idea of what a V3 was versus a V5 and so on. Once I started going to other gyms, however, I realized that their grading standard could be slightly different and may have a harder or easier V5 than one I would find at Kinetics. Now, did this mean that one gym was better than the other or their grading is harder? Not necessarily, but it's a simple method of grading subjectivity, and that can be affected by a multitude of factors, from the route setter's own grading gauge to different styles of routes, from slab to overhang. Then there comes the subjectivity across different countries, which can be even harder to quantify due to different humidity levels or even different rock types when you look at outdoor climbing. Coming from Singapore, the humidity averages around 84% annually and goes up to 100% during prolonged seasons of rain. Similarly, Japan's humidity averages from 70 to 80%. Now if we look at Sweden during May, it can go to as low as 60%, which can make a huge difference when climbing and ultimately affect the grade of a route when climbed in one country versus the other. Finally, there's the fact that different countries use different grading systems altogether, from Europe's Fontainebleau grading, Japan's Dankyu system, to the Hueco scale, more widely referred to as the Vermin or V grading system that a lot of us will be familiar with. Across the board, climbers have come up with rough estimations on how these grading systems compare to each other, but there will always be errors in translation, which only makes it harder to define what the grade of a route actually is. Let's take a look at this chart here that gives us a rough idea of where the different grades stand. A V5 will be equivalent to a 6C on the Fontainebleau, while on the Dankyu system that would be roughly 2Q to 1Q. While I have climbed the V5 at one gym before, I had never climbed a 2Q or a 1Q at another, and this just goes to show how different the grading at various gyms can be. I've talked to climbers who have experienced bouldering in Japan, and they have told me as well that the grading there is generally harder than in Singapore, but that's a different topic to talk about altogether and I won't be getting into it. If you do want to hear more thoughts on differences across countries though, there is a video that I came across where Asher Gavin, who is one of Singapore's top climbers, talks about it in a podcast called Pinch of Salt. Links in the description below. So I mentioned earlier that I recently climbed a grade that I had never done before. This was a 3Q at Boruda climbing gym. that uses the Dankyu system, and when I had done so, I was ecstatic. So here it is in all its glory and my pride.
This is the one. This is the one. Yes! That's the one. Thanks. Ow!
When I completed this tree queue, I was curious to know what the grade would be equivalent to in the V system, and when I found that it was a V3 to V4, I was kind of surprised, disappointed almost, and felt like this was nothing new as I had climbed V3s and V4s in the past. I even climbed a 6C, which is equivalent to a V5 at a gym called Awhile, one that I frequent that also uses the Fontainebleau system. What I've learned, however, is that grades don't matter ultimately. They shouldn't be the be-all end-all, and they shouldn't define me as a climber. Rather, they should be used as a tool to help guide your progress and to help motivate you to climb harder if that's what your goal is. So what did I do to help me get to this point and essentially climb a V5? You may think it's training, perhaps doing hangboard regimes or just getting stronger from becoming fitter. But really, all I did was climb regularly, at least 1 time a week, or when I'm really feeling it, up to 4 times a week. But of course, listen to your body and don't burn out or injure yourself from climbing too often. I found times where I took a break from climbing for several weeks, and when I came back, I ended up climbing even stronger than before because my fingers actually got the time to rest and recover. Will keeping this up help me reach a V7 or V10 eventually? Maybe, but if my last 5 years of recreational climbing has given me any indication, probably not. I think past a certain point in climbing, or any sport for that matter, it takes a certain amount of training to break past a plateau or barrier, but I find that the most important thing for me is to enjoy climbing. So I would have to find a good balance between training and climbing if I wanted that kind of progress. Aside from that, I do think that being intentional about various things while you climb can greatly improve your level over time. For me, being aware about the techniques I use, making sure to practice them, especially ones that I'm weaker at, whenever I climb has shown progress in my climbing. Making sure not to rely on strength and to also be more aware of my body when I climb, like my breathing, the way I extend my arms using body position, or how much strength I need to make a big dynamic move are just some things I find really good to focus on. Lastly, I found that working on a route for an extended period of time, or what we call projecting, is something that many newer climbers overlook. You may simply want to try and complete as many new and fun routes as possible, but working on a route that seems impossible at first can actually help to identify weaknesses and train your techniques required to finish that route. This helps you to develop a new sub-skill within climbing, like using heel hooks, toe hooks, or even just being better at pinches and slaps, which I know I have struggled with in the past. At the end of the day, don't focus too much on reaching a certain grade, but instead work on your weaknesses and focus on building a strong foundation centered around fundamental climbing techniques, and you'll be climbing a V5 in no time. So if you've enjoyed this video, do help me out by smashing that like button and subscribe so that you don't miss the next video. And if there's something you think I missed or would be beneficial to other climbers, feel free to share in the comments what you think and how you got to a V5. That's it for this one, and I'll catch you hanging in the next one. Peace!